Good morning and welcome, everyone. Oh, hang on one sec. Good morning and welcome, everyone. This is a business license hearing to consider the decision of the Chief License Inspector to refuse to issue a business license issued to Anuj Chopra for business premises located at 2807688 Abbott Street. Before we begin, I have a few opening remarks. This hearing is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, City of Vancouver electronic means. As such, panel members may participate in person or by electronic means. Just noting that all of our panel members are actually here in person, as is the licensee and applicant. In case of an emergency where we need to evacuate the building, I would like to direct your attention to the exits. There are 2 exits beyond the glass doors and to the left. If the glass doors are obstructed, please direct your attention to the 4 exits in this chamber. Please use the stairs, do not use the elevator. I'd also like to highlight that there is a defibrillator located at the end of the hallway outside of council chambers. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver's team who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerks, may I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Dominato and Chair, Councillor Boyle, and Councillor Bly. You have quorum, Chair Dominato.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with opening remarks from the City of Vancouver, starting with Ian Dixon, Council for the City of Vancouver. Welcome, Ian.
This is a business license hearing. This particular business license hearing arises from Section 4 of the license bylaw. Section 4 of the license bylaw states that the Chief License Inspector must deny any application for a license where the person has been convicted within the previous 5 years of an offense that relates specifically to the business for which the license is being applied for. And in this case, as you will hear, and I don't think there's any dispute about that, this applicant has received 2 convictions for operating short-term rental accommodations without appropriate licenses. And this application is for a short-term rental license. I'll let Ms. Hicks, the Chief License Inspector, explain the details, but that's the general overview of what we're here for today. The way the license bylaw operates, the Chief License Inspector is required by that section to deny the license, but it is open to the applicant to appeal that decision to ask for a hearing before council. It's not really an appeal because the decision is clearly correct under the bylaw, but it can be they can ask to have the issue revisited by a business license hearing panel, which is what Mr. Chopra has done today. So the extent of the jurisdiction for this panel is broad. You can decide to issue a license or issue a license with conditions. You're not bound by the fact that Mr. Chopra has had a conviction in the last 5 years. That is only binding on the Chief License Inspector. However, I would suggest that it is going to be an important consideration in determining whether or not this is an appropriate licensee for this type of business. As is standard with these business license hearings, the rules of natural justice apply. Mr. Chopra has the ability to present his case and to hear any witnesses against him. Both the panel and Mr. Chopra have the opportunity to ask questions of any witnesses. The city will only have one witness today. That will be the Chief License Inspector, Ms. Hicks. Obviously, should Mr. Chopra choose to testify, he will be subject to questioning both by the panel and by myself. That's the general outline of the proceedings for this morning. The city only has one witness, and I would suggest that we proceed to hearing from Ms. Hicks.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon, and we'll turn it over to Sarah Hicks, Chief License Inspector. Go ahead, Sarah.
A few preliminary matters so that to set the stage here. You are the Chief License Inspector for the City of Vancouver, is that correct?
I am.
And are you familiar with Mr. Chopra's application for a short-term rental business at 2807 688 Abbott Street?
I am.
So can you just turn, and all panel members and Mr. Chopra, Mr. Chopra, you have a copy of the materials? The evidence package?
I do not.
Was it sent to you? Can I ask that we just adjourn for a moment and I speak to Mr. Chopra to find out what's going on?
A motion to recess? Would that be appropriate? Okay, could I get a motion to recess by one of the panelists? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
I suggest we reconvene and deal with it on the record.
Thank you for that momentary pause. I'm going to return to
I've spoken to Mr. Chopra with respect to the evidence brief, and I've reviewed the city clerks. The city clerks say that they sent it on April the 9th, and the email, and then Mr. Chopra responded to that email. If Ms. Hicks can step away from the podium so that Mr. Chopra can step forward. Mr. Chopra, there is an evidence brief. It's a significant evidence brief. It was provided to you. It's up to you whether you wish to. I understand that you don't seem to have it, and can't explain that. We did send it to you. It's up to you whether you wish to proceed in these circumstances or whether you want to ask that this hearing be held on another date.
I wish to proceed.
You wish to proceed?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I am, so that's noted. You wish to proceed today. So we will continue then with the presentation from.
Do we have an extra copy of the evidence brief so that Mr. Chopra could follow along?
We'll have one. Maybe in the interim, I could pass on my copy and someone can print another copy for me. If that, I think, because this one's tabbed already. And so if we can get another tabbed copy.
And it's actually, you know what, I would prefer, actually, if the chair kept hers and I provided mine.
Okay, thank you.
It's of the least importance that I have a copy.
Thank you for everyone's patience as we All in all, just note, Mr. Chopra, that just as we do go through the brief that you see in front of you, is that there is an index, and it's indexed tabs 1 through 15, and the staff will typically be referring to the page numbers as we go through. So just for your information. I'll turn it back to Councillor
you.
Dixon and to Sarah Hicks after that.
Ms. Hicks, I will rely upon you to go through this for the most part, as I no longer have a copy in front of me. But can you turn to tab 13 of that document, of the book?
Yes.
And just panel members and Mr. Chopra, can you just explain what that document is?
This document is the letter that was sent to Anuj in January of this year with relation to the application he submitted for short-term rental, advising him that as a result of the guilty convictions for operating short-term rentals without a business license, that I was bound to deny that application and refer to council for a hearing.
And then can you just turn to tab 11 then?
Yes.
And can you explain what that document is?
Yes. So the document at tab 11 is the guilty plea as a result of operating a short-term rental license at a secondary property that the applicant and his wife own at 1607 188 Kiefer Place.
Okay. And then tab 12.
And on page 12, or tab 12, page 266, is the guilty plea related to operating a short-term rental business without license at 2807 688 Abbott Street, which is the application before council today.
Right. And those two orders, what do they direct Mr. Chopra to do?
The court orders that for a period of 1 year from the date of the order that Anuj Chopra must not use or market the property for short-term rental purposes.
And that applies to both those properties as a result of those convictions.
It does.
I'm going to take you back. So there's obviously a fairly lengthy history between the city and Mr. Chopra with respect to his short-term rental businesses. Is that correct?
There is.
And at that is summarized at tab 3. There's a timeline there. Is that correct?
Tab 2.
Tab 2.
Page
I'm
5.
sorry, I mistyped that. If you could please take the panel through that history and the timeline, please.
Certainly. Anuj Chopra and his wife Jyoti obtained a business license for short-term rental through the online application system in 2018 for 688 Abbott Street. In August of 2020, our team initiated an audit as both of their properties held business licenses for short-term rentals, and Jyoti Chopra was listed on both licenses. Both properties began an audit at the same time. Through the audit for 688 Abbott Street, there was missing documentation to show compliance with the regulations, so a suspension was sent. Communication was going back and forth between Anuj and the team in relation to that missing documentation. Full documentation was not received. A license was not reissued. A warning letter was sent in October of 2020, warning that the listing was still up, but not bookable at the time. And in April of 2021, we further closed the case. We weren't, at that time, it was non-bookable, and we didn't find further evidence at that moment. In October of 2021, we reopened case files related to unlicensed operations at 688 Abbott. And sent a order and tickets to both Anuj and Jyoti. Anuj contacted the team immediately thereafter and advised that their belief was that they had a business license for the operations. They did pay the tickets as no license was issued to that site. The case then closed for no active listing on that particular one. Shortly after receiving the tickets and paying the tickets, Anuj applied for another business license at 688 Abbott Street, and a full verification process began. including inspections of the site and an in-person audit meeting. Through that, a decision was made by the Deputy Chief License Inspector to not support the business license, and communication was sent. Communication went back and forth again after that time with Anuj and city staff, warning Anuj to not operate without a license. In January of 2022, so that suspension was December 2021. In January 2022, staff continued to find evidence that they were operating without a business license, and the case was referred to prosecutions. In September of 2022, Anuj did plead guilty, and through this document and evidence file, you will find at tab pages 81, that, and then 109 through 134, that it does show screenshots of the reviews that guests were providing to the suite through July of 2021 all the way up to October of 2022, in which the property was unlicensed. Near that same time, in March of 2022, staff also found that the secondary property at 188 Kiefer was also operating without business license, and evidence was forwarded to prosecutions for that case as well. At the same time, in September of 2022, Anuj pled guilty again to operating without a business license for that particular property. After that time, staff received a couple of other applications for 688 Abbott Street from tenants that were wishing to seek short-term rentals for the property. Through the inspections, it was found that there was work without permit in a portion of the residence where a solarium was removed without appropriate permitting on the city side. So those licenses were denied until the time that that could be resolved and the work was determined to be safe and appropriate. In January of this year, that work was completed, and Anuj has reapplied for a business license to run short-term rentals at the property, which was denied as a result of those guilty convictions and tickets, and is before you today.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
So, Ms. Hicks, that's the timeline of what's been involved. Does that were Mr. Chopra to apply for a business license absent the convictions, but given the other parts of this history, what would your view on his application be?
Sorry, absence of the
convictions, but assume if he had not been convicted, but the rest of this had occurred.
If the rest of this had occurred, I would continue to deny the application because they continue to show a disregard for the bylaws.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments you wish to make about Mr. Chopra's application?
Not about Mr. Chopra's. We are considering an application from his wife at the property at this time. We are reviewing documentation and considering the history as well as the convictions at hand for that application.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. It's now time for panel members. If you have questions for the witness, please place yourselves on the queue. I see Councillor Bly. I'll advance you.
Thanks very much. Actually, I was just very interested in that last comment. Could you just explain under what rules and bylaws, if they are co-owners on a property, can one person as a co-owner apply when this is happening for the same property for a new short-term rental license that's being considered? Did I understand that correctly?
I believe you did.
Okay.
Yes. We have to consider all applications that come forward. So both property owners could certainly apply independent of each other, and we would consider the information available to us and that they can provide about whether or not they would be suitable to operate a short-term rental.
Okay, and so that's because there really isn't any restrictions on who can apply. But given the history of this particular site, that would be taken into consideration, would it, when considering the application that you have in front of you?
We consider the whole history of the site and ownership. This system would not deny an applicant from applying, and then it is our duty to review that application and the history before us to make a decision on the license.
Okay. And just perhaps to state the obvious, can you confirm that this property is or is not a primary residence of the short-term rental license applicants? So is it a primary, registered as a primary property for the applicant?
They have put forward that it is their primary residence.
Okay, but the evidence shows that there's multiple listings?
At both, they own two separate properties. Both properties had been listed and operated without license, and the applicant presumably left that property, this property, for a period of time because long-term rental applicants began to apply for short-term rentals. And then Anuj has applied again, purporting that they've moved back into the property as their primary residence.
Okay, and the other property that's not necessarily the topic of what we're talking about today is also listed as a primary residence with a short-term rental license?
Not at this time.
It was.
It was. Jyoti is applying on this property for a short-term rental license.
Okay, and just the last question. Do we cross-reference licenses of properties, names of owners on title, and whether or not they're registered as primary residents?
We do some of that work, yes. When we are conducting audits, we will verify those threads that we can to determine where the connections are across property types or across license types to help us understand whether or not they are principal residents.
Okay, and arguably, not that we're discussing policy here, but arguably that's going to become more helpful with the new provincial legislation around short-term rental restrictions.
Yes. Particularly
right now, without those restrictions, it's not that helpful in a way because we don't have rules to say, well, in Vancouver we do, but generally speaking, yeah.
We do have rules that very much mirror what the province has developed. The information that the province will be able to provide through the platform data as well as through their eventual registration system, which on their end is going to compare property owner information, will all be helpful. We gather a number of documents from applicants in order to help us understand their principal residency and length of term at a property, from interviews to ICBC histories to tax documents.
Okay. I'll just leave it there for now. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bly, and I'll advance Councillor Boyle for questions.
Thanks. I was a bit confused by the, what I understood to be longer-term renters. Are past violations or convictions on the bylaw connected to the applicant or to the property? Like if a unit then gets long-term rented to someone different who then applies for a short-term rental, is that a...
These convictions were related to Anuj and Jyoti. Their same listing that had been up for their business license was up online and operating, as well as being the property owners and allowing unlicensed activity to occur, was this particular conviction that we're discussing today.
Okay. And do we see it happen that a unit will then get long-term rented to someone else who then short-term rents the property?
We do, yep. We'll see properties turn over from applicant to applicant seeking short-term rental licenses. if for particular reasons they are denied.
Okay. And what are the paths to, it seems to me a pretty messy history on this application. What is the path to compliance down the road? Or if there are past convictions, is there no path to getting a business license to short-term rent again?
Well, if there are past convictions, I have to come forth to a hearing. You have that ability to say yes to a license if you wish. In terms of staff, we would want to see a reasonable period of compliance, of not listing, of not breaking bylaws, of either having, appropriate long-term tenants in the site and living there, or they themselves being able to show that they've lived there for a period of time and in compliance with regulations.
Okay, appreciate that. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. We'll now make space and time for the applicant to ask questions of the witness. And so, Anuj Chopra, that allows you to ask our witness questions with respect to the hearing today.
Do not have any questions.
Thank you. Well, in that case, then we will move to opening remarks from yourself as the applicant. And you are also permitted to call witnesses if you do have any, but you yourself are a witness. Clerks, may I just confirm how much time Anuj has to present? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, Your Honor, I stand before you all with humility and profound acknowledgement of my past missteps. I have studied the bylaws and understood every single bylaw of the city related to short-term rentals, and even went through my building strata bylaws to understand what are the right steps to do to overcome my past, my mistakes, and provide and set a right example. I'm not asking for a second chance, but I'm asking for an opportunity where I can showcase that someone who's done a mistake unknowingly has the ability to come forward and fix those mistakes and make sure those are not repeated. My unit 2807 688 Abbott Street was previously, the solarium was removed by the previous owner, which I was not aware of. And when I tenanted my condo to long-term renters, their main purpose of renting a unit in this building is so they can support themselves by leveraging short-term rentals, because there are very few buildings in downtown Vancouver which allow short-term rentals, and my building is one of those buildings which allow. So those tenants were being denied short-term rental application, and my unit was empty. I was struggling to even rent for long-term renters. My wife and I decided to pay off our mortgage. We should move back to our unit, and we have a second bedroom which we can put it on Airbnb or other platforms if we get approved. We have been living here and supporting our strata, supporting our neighborhood in different ways. We're volunteering for short-term rental bylaws in our building, making sure common properties are clean. We do a lot of those things as well. So I humbly request your leniency and consideration in allowing me to reestablish my Airbnb business, not as a privilege, but as an earned opportunity to contribute positively to our community. There's nothing else I have to say.
Thank you for those comments. Is there anyone else with you who is serving as a witness to comment today?
No.
Just yourself? In that case, we do have, in terms of next steps, the panelists today have an opportunity to ask you questions, and then our council as well. So I'll start with our panelists, and I'll just, I see Councillor Boyle, that's a holdover. Okay, so I'll clear the queue and just start again to see if there's any questions from our panelists. Just add yourself to the queue. Thank you, Councillor Boyle. I'll advance you.
Thanks very much for sharing your sort of side of the situation. I just am curious around the difficulty renting long term. Can you elaborate? We're obviously dealing with a rental shortage, I would say, people would say, in our city, a vacancy rate of less than 1%. So just
The difficulty of renting long term for me is when someone rents my place, they come with the mindset that they will be able to put second bedroom or the place on Airbnb when they travel or they work. And when they apply for the license, they get denied for different reasons. Recent reason was my unit is not a legal dwelling because of unlawful changes have been made inside the unit, which I wasn't aware of.
your second bedroom, you mean the solarium second bedroom situation?
No.
No?
Our building has enclosed balcony. So there was a sliding door which was removed. So enclosed balcony was part of the bedroom now, so making the bedroom a little bigger. So that was done by the previous owner. I wasn't aware. I learned the process, how to fix that. My tenants left. My place was empty. I brought in contractors, architect. Then I've submitted the plans to the city, and they approved the new floor plan of my unit. So now my unit is a legal dwelling, and then my wife and I moved back to our unit. It's our principal residence. We had all the required documents to apply for short-term rental, and we applied, and that's why I'm here.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks. I have a couple of quick questions. If the clerks could put me on the queue. I'm just curious, you just mentioned just in response to the question around the renovations that were made to the unit. Did you say they were made by the previous owner or a tenant that you had?
Previous owner. We bought this unit in 2017, and the renovations were made by the previous owner, which was not disclosed to us, which we were not aware until 2022 inspection by city.
Okay. And just noting, you offered in your comments today an apology that maybe misunderstood the bylaws and that you're here seeking a business license because you want to be in compliance. I'm just curious, it was referenced and asked earlier that this is your principal dwelling, but when inspectors visited your dwelling, it appeared that you were not living there. It did not appear to be that anyone was living there and that it was being used for Airbnb on a full-time basis, and that when you were asked about how many days it had been used for Airbnb, you weren't forthcoming in disclosing that information from what I read in the questions that were asked of you through the process here. Could you speak to that? Because and I asked the question in earnest because you're coming to us saying, I made a mistake. Now I want a business license. I'm going to do it differently. But you didn't answer questions in a forthright way from what I read in the testimony.
I had answered every question city had from short-term rental department had asked me. They came in for the audit, and it was surprising to me that they believed that I do not live there. My belongings were there. That's how I live. Everything was there, but there are pictures in the evidence package, which I just saw, that shows that I live there, but it was believed that I do not. And I'm here to answer any questions which you referring to. If I have missed, I can answer them again right now if there are any.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's I see Councillor Bly has another question, and then after that we'll move to Council, but I'll advance Councillor Bly for questions.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I just had a follow-up question, and it is related to you sort of asking for leniency in the sense that now you understand the bylaws and what have you. Can you just clearly articulate what your intention is with this property outside of this hearing?
So my dad was recently diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He's went back to India, and my wife and I do not have a lot of funds to be traveling and paying the mortgage. Our plan is to put our place on 3 weeks on short-term rental when we travel, and when I come back, our trip to India will be paid off with short-term rental income for that 3 weeks period. And moving forward, our mortgage and interest rates are really, really high. So my intention is to, if we are comfortable, putting the second bedroom as short-term rental to generate additional income to support ourselves. If not, we will only put it on short-term rentals when we travel.
Okay, and just noting there that short-term, you second bedroom, if you're comfortable. Have you done that before?
Yes, we have.
So why are you asking if you're comfortable in the future? Wouldn't you know?
We did not have pets. Now we have 2 dogs, and just for that reason, guests might not want us to. They might not use our space, or we will not be comfortable having someone over while we are there with our dogs.
Just looking at the evidence package, there were screenshots of the various, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. No, what, when people come and stay and they make their comments about how they enjoyed their stay, I didn't see any that referenced cohabitating. And oftentimes in an Airbnb, when there's cohabitating, there's often a comment about it was really nice to be with the owners, or, felt like the spaces were separated, or there's always something about referencing that, and there's nothing in yours, which I find very odd.
I can probably look back and find some. We
No,
have
I
met.
had a look.
I'm not sure.
Okay, it is significant in that sense.
Just noting you have about 10 seconds left.
Thanks. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bly. I will now turn to Councillor Dixon for questions to the applicant.
I just have one question. I just want to clarify with regard. There's 2 properties that there were convictions for. The one that you're currently applying for, it's at 688 Abbott, 2807 688 Abbott, correct?
Correct.
And that's your primary residence?
That is.
Both you and your wife's primary residence?
That is.
What's the status of 1607 188 Kiefer?
It's tenanted to long-term.
You still own it?
We still own it.
That's my question.
Thank you. We'll now move to closing submissions by City's Council this time. Thank you. You can sit down, yeah.
I'll be brief. The license bylaw is set up with the 5-year requirement that the chief license inspector reject any applications for someone who's been convicted of an offence within the previous 5 years. It's in there for a reason. It's in there for a reason that we that we do not want, and the council, when they passed the bylaw, concluded they did not want people who had been actively violating bylaws to hold business licenses. And it's structured so that so there's an initial rejection by the chief license inspector, but an appeal is open to council here, which is why we're here today. In my submission, council should only use that power in extraordinary circumstances. If there's some extraordinary reason why the person violated the bylaw, and there could be reasons in which they're to not allow them to have the license subsequent to that would result in some great hardship, or there was some extraordinary circumstance around the conviction. I have not heard that from the applicant here. It's preferable for him to have an Airbnb license, but his track record and the track record surrounding this property is very suspect, as you heard from the chief license inspector. In my submission, it would be dangerous and it would be inappropriate for council to exercise its discretion to issue a business license to Mr. Chopra in these circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Anuj Chopra, you now have an opportunity to present closing submissions to the business license hearing panel, if you wish.
I just want to apologize for for my mistakes of disregarding and being careless and not taking the bylaw seriously. And I am following every single regulations, and I request you to consider how helpful this decision will be moving forward in an expensive city like this. So any decision, I will happily accept it.
Thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
We'll now move to discussion. For any panel members who would like to make comments, please put yourselves on the queue. I see Councillor Bly on the queue. If not, we can move to decision if there's no.
Thanks. I was just waiting for my mic. It's all good. I just wanted to ask a follow-up. Is that possible at this point? Yeah. Can I just like to ask through Ian Dixon as our legal counsel and perhaps through to our chief license inspector, what were the dates that the inspections happened in terms of?
To recall the chief license inspector and ask her directly.
Thank you. The audit, yeah.
Sorry, the dates of the inspections?
Yes.
Can you give me a moment?
Yeah. I know it's in that package, but I suspect you'll find it faster than me.
So there was a inspection conducted on December 14th, 2021. And then on December 16th, 2022.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. And just to confirm, it is the testimony of the applicant that they were living at the location throughout this time.
For the 2021, yes, the secondary inspection into 2022 was as a result of a long-term tenant asking for a short-term rental license.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. So discussion?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I see a few things here. I think that, you know, I get that these are difficult times, particularly 2021, 2022, coming out of COVID. Lots of changes were happening in terms of employment and affordability and how people were living and coming out of the pandemic. So I always take that into consideration. You know, I think at the end of the day, there's a recognition of responsibility by the applicant that they were negligent in understanding the bylaws and following the bylaws. That's on one hand. But on the other hand, I sort of question the validity of some of the rationale and reasons and in terms of how the property has been used ongoing. You know, I really do focus on when folks leave recommendations on the Airbnb and that's submitted as evidence. One of them in 2021 clearly states that it was a great stay and particularly pleased that when the applicant's short-term rental guests let them know that there were no pots and pans. They brought pots and pans right away with a bottle of champagne to account for that. So to me, there's no way you're living in the property without pots and pans. So I get we're talking over the period of maybe 3 or 4 years here, and memories can be a bit foggy in terms of timing, but I just don't think that the evidence shows that we have heard exactly what the truth and facts are to this situation. There's a lot of personal circumstances that affect our ability to sort of manage, and I appreciate interest rates and mortgage costs and all of those things, but owning two properties and being able to manage two properties, that is the purview of the owner of those properties. So you have the ability to sell or you have the ability to do other things. And I'm not going to dictate what should happen there. So at the end of the day, I appreciate the way that the evidence has been laid out by our legal counsel with the support of our chief license operator. And I'd be happy to move the recommendation that we uphold the decision of the chief license inspector, which is to refuse the business license to the applicant on the basis that the applicant has two previous convictions within the past 5 years. You know, at the end of the day, I think I'm not a punitive person by any stretch, but I think at the end of the day, accountabilities are what they are. And we need to be able to follow the bylaw without variation when it, in my mind, is as clear as this particular situation is, and ensure that not only to the applicant, but that folks realize that we have these bylaws in place for a reason and they must be followed in order for us to balance both the need for autonomy around one's own property, but also, you know, we are in a housing crisis. We know that short-term rental has been has had an impact in our city in terms of multiple licenses, and we're coming out of that. And we know the province is really leaning into this as being a huge problem across the province in a housing crisis. And so all of those pieces come together to this application today. So with that, I'll move, and I have sent in the motion to uphold the chief license inspector's decision today.
Thank you, Councillor Bly, and I'll need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Boyle. Any further discussion? I'll advance Councillor Boyle.
Just to say, I think Councillor Bly outlined the concerns really well. A pattern of non-compliance is a real concern for me, and I appreciate that we heard what would be required, that 5 years is the period the bylaw sets out as a reasonable period of compliance with the bylaws to match what I hear and believe to be a sincere apology. That sincere apology needs to be matched with a reasonable period of compliance in order to be able, in my opinion, to be able to come back and apply and earn and be issued a business license potentially at some point in the future. But in these, as Councillor Bly said very well, these rules exist for good reason because we are in a housing crisis and we need to make sure that housing is being prioritized for long-term renters. And so I am comfortable upholding the recommendation from the Chief License Inspector.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. And similarly, I think that I'll just add a few comments to wrap up that I think that Councillor Bly and Councillor Boyle have articulated some serious concerns around compliance and that record. And as noted, looking at the evidence package, Councillor Bly noted some anomalies with respect to the actual listing in the comments, but also I noted in the transcript with our staff and the questions that were asked, there was a lack of information and forthcoming around the bookings that had taken place in terms of what was relayed by Anuj Chopra and his wife, and that of what the records had found in terms of Airbnb listings. And so I'm of a similar mind to my colleagues on the panel. So in that case, I will call the question on the motion. And well, I think we'll just do a show of hands given they're a small number. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. That brings us to the end of this business license hearing. I believe we simply need a motion to adjourn. If moved, seconded, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to our staff. Meeting's adjourned.